Welcome back. We have Sarita, myself, Alisha, and Rowan, and we are talking about the mythical cervical lip. Some people will say, oh, they don't exist at all. Don't know what you're talking about. And some people will say, oh, I see them all the time and I have to hold them back for all of my clients. So we thought this would be a cool conversation. Rowan, would you like to give us some fire to start us off?
Well, yeah, sure. I think my first question is always, how do you even know? Why is your hand in there?
Mhm.
Like, maybe that's the problem
Right.
to begin with. Because what is a cervical lip? Let's start with the definition.
So
Anyone?
I would like to hear Sarita's definition.
Yeah.
Um, well, my definition is it's a cervix that's not completely dilated yet for whatever reason and in whatever way. And
Mhm.
what I would say is that the whole thing has evolved because obstetrics taught us to be cervix centric and that the cervix is supposed to dilate like some kind of machine in some way, no matter what. And so anything that varies from that, Friedman's curve, to use that as a myth, seems to be able to get diagnosed as something that's wrong. When if we weren't cervix centric and we put it into a whole picture, we might understand it very differently. So I agree with Rowan. Why are you checking? And why do you think a cervix is supposed to work mechanically?
Well, and we're thinking of a cervical lip as the diagnosis. It's not.
Mhm.
This is a symptom. It's
Right.
the sign of it's an invitation of what's happening. What's the position? What's the not even the stage of labor, but what's just the super intricate stage of where the baby's at? Um, so it feels like, yes, we need to almost always we need to back up and look at the whole person, the whole picture, the mother and baby.
Mhm.
And it's not just, oh, you've got a cervical lip, throw this herb at it, put my fingers in there and hold it. But is this simply you were in there at the wrong time, feeling the wrong place, for an example? Would it work itself out? There's so much intricacy to this story that's not just a simple label that we love to see slapped on people.
Right. Right.
Uh,
And it gives, so this is going to be maybe a difficult thing to think about, but it gives midwives who already feel like they're being judged for not doing anything, right? When we're already, I mean, we're doing lots.
Mhm.
We're there sensing and paying attention, and even if it looks like we're just sitting in the corner knitting or whatever, and suddenly it gives us a reason to save the day, to
Mhm.
get involved, to
Mhm.
take over, for lack of a better way of saying it, which is what brings me back to that whole, it really is an obstetric model that we're even making this be something that is that has a definition, a diagnosis. We could just say, the definition is a cervix that's not fully dilated, right? Like
right.
that's it, right? And why do we think we need to be in there? Um, it often, when I've seen these things, it's often, the mom says, I want to push, or I feel like being pushing. But if you understand spontaneous pushing, you realize that that's not the same thing, right? It's,
Mhm.
and if we wait until you can't keep from it to push, then it's a whole different perspective. And we don't need to think that somebody's ready to push just because their brain tells them or just because they're feeling pressure. But it's, I always kind of equated the fetal ejection reflex with, for lack of a better way, throwing up, right? Only you throw down.
It's like
And
vaginal vomiting.
pretty much. And you can try to hold it back when you want to throw up, but there comes a moment when you can't hold it back, right? Like, so for pushing, spontaneous pushing, that was what I talked a lot about, especially prenatally, about don't push until you can't keep from it. Like
Mhm.
do what you can to not push, because once it comes, you can't keep from it. And by then, that the uterus is saying it's time, not the brain.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Because really what's happening there is like suddenly, there's a head
Mhm.
right there. And of course the desire would be to get that out, right? Like
Right,
there's
right,
pressure, but there's not pushing.
right.
And those are different.
Are there special
Plus, we've been taught.
nerves? My question would be, are there special nerves in the cervix that translate to, oh, I need to push past this. I have all this pressure. Is that something we're feeling? Because you do see that, oh, I want to push, or I've got this like itch to push, and you make that decision to push. It's not this reflexive.
Right.
Mhm.
Well, I think part of it is this might be controversial too much childbirth education, right?
Mm.
Like too much of knowing that when we can push, we're almost done. So everybody's waiting for that, right? Like that's what, again, being cervix centric and the obstetrical model has brought us to.
Mhm.
Everybody's waiting to get to pushing. And so I've seen people many times who and I understand, like I've been there, like you just want it to be over with, right? Unfortunately, when you override the uterus's good sense and try to, push before it's time, you wind up creating more complications like exhaustion and lack of confidence and a lot of those kinds of things. So in many, I'll have to wonder. I have to wonder if this was really an issue, especially hearing. And I've heard what Rowan said. I've heard a midwife, especially hospital-based midwives, indicate that almost everybody had a cervical lip and they had to hold it back for everybody, and they were known for that. Is that really in traditionally, if we weren't so cervix centric and we weren't doing vaginal exams, would this have even been an issue? Unless it really was that something was going on and the baby was having a hard time navigating that that exit, right? Which, well, I've seen that too. I saw one that absolutely it wasn't going to go away, and it was a very anatomical thing with the mom's cervix and between the way the baby was positioned against that
That's the
cervix.
only time we've ever had to do that as well. It was a really narrow pelvic inlet, and the baby molded and got impacted in a very specific way. And that was the choice that was made. And the
Mhm.
right choice at the time. I find it, well, what Sarita's you're talking about with that obstetrical model, it's like that a centimeter an hour, right? And so
Right,
oftentimes vaginal exams are being done hourly. And I'm like, what if you just caught this particular cervix in between moving from 9 to 10? Maybe
right,
she's 9.5,
right,
and that half is what you're calling a lip, you know? And and I have seen someone be checked at 8 centimeters, and then she just had the baby.
hmm
She just had the baby, even though she didn't necessarily say she was feeling pushy. It was a smaller baby, and maybe the cervix blasted. I don't know. Or maybe the baby just came out of an 8 centimeter cervix.
right,
There's still so much mystery involved in what's going on in there because we're not seeing it. We've created these rules of 10 centimeters of this, and of, an hour, a centimeter a minute, or a minute.
yeah.
Well,
Those are tough.
I'm not feeling well today, and it's coming out in my speech. Sorry. I am all of these rules and check boxes, not every woman can fit those.
Right,
And um and then there is, what if we've done so much checking and maneuvering that we've caused swelling now?
right, right. The whole thing with being cervix centric, as if it were just a machine, is then we've forgotten about how the brain talks to the uterus in the first place, right? Because we know that the sympathetic nervous system has to engage to make the fetal ejection reflex happen. And so it hasn't happened yet. At 9.5 centimeters or 9 centimeters, or before that ejection reflex happens, we're really overriding the body's innate ability to know when it's time and when everything's in place, right? So once we really focus on understanding how the brain talks to the different fibers of the uterus and what has to happen before that coordination can work together to eject the baby, then we're really just becoming a cog in that machine that is managing the body rather than supporting its internal processes, which are always going to be the most efficient in the long run. It actually just reminded me of a story of somebody I attended many years ago, and I attended their first birth, which was, like a primate, and it was long. And then her second birth, her dilation was pretty quick, and she asked to be checked. And I only checked if I couldn't talk them out of it, or if I really felt like I needed that information. But she wanted to be checked. Couldn't talk her out of it. Checked her, and she was 9 centimeters. And her emotional response to that was, "Wait, I'm not ready yet." So whereas she had been dilating really rapidly up to that point, at 9 centimeters, she stopped after we checked her, because her brain was very much, "Wait, I'm not ready yet." And she stayed at that 9 centimeters for quite some time until she emotionally and her brain kicked in, and then she was ready for the next part. So that was sort of the opposite of saying, "Oh, I can't wait till push." Hers was like, "But wait, I'm not ready yet." So we don't really know what we're doing when we interfere with that information and bring them out of that labor land, that baby land that our brains need to be in for everything to work efficiently.
I'm thinking, could the cause not only be a compound something presentation, or some kind of an asynclitic coming down, but I'm also thinking, could it just be a restrictive piece? Say someone had a cone biopsy or a LEEPS procedure in her past, and this was maybe some scar tissue. Have you seen that or felt that?
Um, what I've seen with interruptions to the cervix, I'll call them that, whether it be a LEEP or cone biopsy, and this was way more true when they used to do cone biopsies, is that you tended to see not so much a asymmetrical opening, but more of scar tissue that kept the cervix from opening as efficiently, especially the cone biopsy, because it took out the middle, this actual the middle of the cervix, the canal. And so there was definitely more scarring down in those. With leaps, what I've seen, depending on how deep the procedure had to go, was just a shortened cervix, but not necessarily. And maybe if they lopped it off, not symmetrically, you might see something like that. But really, like I feel like when I've seen it, it's just been because the brain wanted to push and the body wasn't ready yet, and cervical lip was the excuse, for lack of a better
Okay.
word.
Okay.
Yeah.
And mostly we're seeing cervical lips as in, which is hard to envision it, but it's like, say you've got a clock and you're saying, say like 10 and 11 o'clock just aren't where the
Yeah.
rest of it is.
Yeah, really just like I think of it more as just the anterior part, like maybe 11 to 1, or if you're going
Okay.
to use it as a clock, or in that anterior part, whatever it might be. And I'll come back to, the obstetrical myth, and the studies would show that the cervix is supposed to always dilate in some symmetrical fashion. And not all cervixes read those textbooks. Like they don't know
No.
that's what they're supposed to do, right? Like they do what they need to do to keep the baby safe and have everything ready before the baby comes out. I've also seen, whether it's a cervical lip or it's a labor that's a little bit different than the ones they've had in the past, or it's a start what Liz that I used to work with used to call piddle piddle pop. The long labors that come and go, and maybe some irregular contractions. Almost always what I've seen is that the uterus was protecting something, either a short cord or a really wrapped cord or a weak spot in the insertion or something that every maybe even a baby that's a little bit compromised prior to labor, everything needed to be out of the way and completely open before the baby began its descent into its emergence, right? Piddle piddle
Mm-hmm.
pop. So it just kept everything intact so that that emergence could be quick and a little bit more straightforward. So, maybe that's part of what we're seeing whenever you don't have that symmetrical dilation, that it's something that the body's doing so that everything's in place before that final ejection.
Have you felt a swollen cervix? That's the fear that most midwives have. Oh, don't push too early, or don't push on the cervical lip because you'll swell it.
Once, once. And that was the one that was the anatomical, whatever was going on. Yeah. And
Okay.
that one became so swollen you could see it from the outside.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, this is a long time ago, and now we transported because all right, we can't. Well, there's not much we can do about that at home. And interestingly, the OB tried to and encouraged her to keep pushing, which just made it swell more. And she did, of course, wind up with a C-section. The
Yeah.
cervix became the obstruction.
So that brings to my mind is the question I guess I'm trying to come up with is this the place where we would see then a cervical tear,
Mhm.
right?
Yes, yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. And I think that we actually see that there's a lot more tears than we realize because they don't necessarily bleed. The cervix isn't super vascular, except in certain areas. And I only know that because I've done, I don't know, thousands of pap smears and speculum exams. And I would often see these little scars, right, that came out from the os. Um, and I would often ask the person, did anybody tell you that your cervix tore? Because clearly, I mean, there's a scar there and it's not always there for everybody. So, and pretty much the answer was always no. Nobody ever told me that. So I kind of wonder, especially within a obstetrical model with inductions and augmentation and being told to push just because you're fully dilated, if we cause more cervical damage than we realize with that approach.
Mhm.
That makes sense. I had not a client, midwife friend of mine who had some scarring on her cervix, and I cannot remember why, but it was a long time ago, and it bothered her in that um there would like she would be doing she was a yoga instructor and she would be doing yoga and noises would happen. So I went in just, gloved up and went in with coconut oil and popped all of those little scars, just massaged them out, and
Mhm.
it went away. It was so interesting to feel them like actually give way under your fingers. And it doesn't take a
Mhm.
whole lot of pressure with some. I'm sure some scars are much worse, but with hers, it was just really easy to massage it out.
Interesting.
Was that painful for her?
Nope. Nope. She said yeah, wasn't even uncomfortable. She was just like, get it done. And she was also just in a get it done, kind
Mhm.
of thing. Um,
There's a homeopathy that's really great for dissolving scar tissue. I can't remember it at the moment. But would that be something? I couldn't see how you could put that on the cervix, or if
You,
you would just take that internally.
I am not a fan of topical homeopathics at all. I don't even think that they work. I'm sorry. I know it's, I
Love it.
think that might be one of we thought of that. Uh, the placebo effect.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it would depend on it, of course, if you know ahead of time, then it would be, really great for it. Silica is really good for painful keloid type. Um, Theos is good for dissolving scar tissue, so that would probably be the one you would go to
That's the
for,
one I was thinking of. Yep.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, if you know ahead of time, why wouldn't you go ahead and try some homeopathics and see if it could dissolve? It can't hurt. That's what I love about homeopathy, is it'll either do nothing or it'll work if it's the right remedy.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Have you guys heard or seen of any other than popping the scars, doing homeopathy, holding it back yourself? Have you heard or seen of any other modalities or things that midwives rub on or do or have you swallow or insert? Either, well, and that would be different because you've got, we're talking about scar tissue and we're talking about cervical lips. So then just cervical lips. What other things have you seen for that?
So for a cervical lip, you might want to think about gelsemium homeopathically, which is for a rigid os, and so it just helps things like continue to open. If you have a true lip, gelsemium could be it. But you're also with homeopathics, especially, you're looking at the whole picture of the woman and what is her constitution.
Yeah,
So I
Mhm.
might even, if I do know her constitution, just use her constitutional remedy.
I love that. And like Sarita, your story of she was mentally not ready. I don't have Jill Simeon's emotional component memorized, but I'm wondering if that one has a similar
Gelsemium is
emotional
a stage fright. So you
Mhm.
think of like, I'm being watched. I don't want to perform. I don't, why are all these
fascinating.
people looking at me? So that's the constitution of gelsemium. And is often used for people who have actual stage fright and they have to go on and speak, right? That is a thing that can happen.
Mhm.
So, I'm sorry, a dog
And
is
their
looking.
cervix just happens to be soft on the stage.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And then
So,
it could even be like the opposite, because I think in the story I told, it was somebody who didn't want it to be over, who wanted what was happening, who wanted to be the center of attention, if you want to
mm,
think of it that way, right?
so then
So
I think
that's where the
pulsatile.
constitutional thing comes in.
Yeah, that would remind me a little bit of maybe a pulsatilla woman,
Mhm.
which is the divine feminine, and she loves to be, she's certainly wants to be more uh that center, having all that nourishment feels really good for
Mm.
pulsatilla, because then it becomes all about the baby.
Right,
Once the baby's born, it's all about the baby,
right,
and the baby is the center focus.
right. I know for myself, I mean, I didn't have any vaginal checks other than anything I did on myself. But my third one came really fast, like 45 minutes. And, and a fast labor and a breech baby. And that leaves you feeling overwhelmed because you don't really have time to kind of like build everything else up. So the next time, 6 years later, my last one, I really wanted the labor to be longer and gentler, right? So in many ways for me, trying to slow it down, and I mean at the end it was so fast, but I didn't want to walk away from it feeling like I'd been run over by a truck,
Hmm.
which is what the 45-minute one kind of did to my head.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of different reasons, and we just have to remember that it's more than just a cervix that opens up like you're cranking a door open, right? Like it's the mom's relationship with herself, it's the mom's experience of that moment of previous births, it's the relationship between the mom and the baby. And ultimately, other than that one time, I've really never seen it not go away on its own. So even if we're in there and you asked about things, I've seen vitamin E oil used, I've seen evening primrose oil used. I know of someone that uses CBD oil and swears by it. And how do we know that it wouldn't have dissolved anyway, regardless of what we did, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, it went away, but would it have gone away anyway?
Mhm.
Like, there's so many variables that we just, again, the cervix didn't read the textbooks, so we have to have a understanding of that relationship within itself. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Any last thoughts before we finish? I like this.
Yeah, that was fun. I mean, I think I'm in between the they don't exist and everybody has one. I'm like, I think they're probably overdiagnosed
Right.
Yeah.
and that it's just not, like, as Sarita said brilliantly, she's just not fully dilated yet.
Right.
Um, but in specific instances, of course, like the one that Sarita had, it was anatomical. I had one that was that way. It wasn't going away. Um, then there could be a true lip and maybe something would want to be done.
Right.
So this is
Something
yet another piece of physiology that is being misconstrued and misunderstood and turned into a pathology when not always needed.
Not
right.
always.
So I would end by encouraging everybody to learn how to assess the progress of labor without putting your fingers in the vagina
Mm.
and looking at, I personally became very confident in measuring the different distance between the uterine fundus and the mom's breastbone. And if I wanted to know, if I couldn't figure out any other way, or she wanted an answer, I found that very reliable, and that gave someone the information they wanted if they wanted it, without having to disturb the cervix. Cervical exams, vaginal exams, those are obstetrical skills. They're not really midwifery skills. They're skills we have adopted as midwives, but all of these other ways of knowing and tracking this person's labor are the midwifery skills that obstetricians don't have, right? So maternal behaviors, rise of the fundus, inactive labor, there's so many other ways besides finding and diagnosing pathology through an obstetrical skill.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, you guys. We'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.